Was the story of Jesus borrowed from pagan myths? There was a time somewhere in the 60s when in theology there was the school of history of religion school, when the critical scholars tended to explain everything in the New Testament or everything in the Christian faith as having been borrowed from mystery religions or from other outside sources. And this thought kind of made a popular comeback after it was totally discredited in the academia, actually. But it made a popular comeback by a movie called Zeitgeist. I don't know if you've heard. Okay, Zeitgeist. Oh my. The amount of email that I received after the Zeitgeist was... whew. So basically, the claim is that the story of Christianity and the story of Jesus is kind of a copy from the ancient myths such as Egyptian Horus or Indian story of Krishna, Greeks, Attis, Persians, Mithra, Greece had their Dionysus, and of course Christians have Jesus. So for example, Krishna is claimed to have been born of a virgin, and when he was born, a star was seen in the east. They claim that he performed miracles and he was resurrected. That's what they say. And all these same kind of details supposedly you can find from these various sources. So now here is that thesis very bluntly. The nucleus of the popular cults, as the cult of Attis, Osiris, and Adonis, is this. A divine being comes to earth, assumes human form, dies a violent death, rises, and through union with him, men are redeemed. And what does Paul teach? A being that existed in the form of God appeared on earth in the likeness of sinful flesh, was crucified and rose from the dead. Men, through their relation to this experience of a celestial being, are redeemed. This was what George Holley Gilbert said. He was an American scholar in the 1920s. So that kind of encapsulates this thesis. And this is it seems it's very popular in the internet. And all these kind of internet skeptics, at least when they are having their morning coffees, they like to write these kind of things to you and challenge you. But here is, again, a very, very good resource for that. And I have kind of summarized certain critical points that clearly show that this thesis doesn't work. Ronald Nash, in his book, The Gospel and the Greeks, make these following points about this thesis that Jesus is just copied from the mystery religions. First of all, one has to take into consideration the uncompromising monotheism and the exclusiveness of the early church. They were as intolerant towards pagan mythologies and foreign gods as were the ancient Hebrew prophets. He also makes this interesting point that, of course, the Hellenistic world was very syncretistic. They took influences from here and there. And later maybe Gnosticism was a kind of a form of thinking that kind of took a little bit of Christianity and a little bit of some other thoughts from the Hellenistic thought. But the early church was very opposed very strongly this kind of syncretism. But this Hellenistic syncretism, according to Nash, was God's providential preparation of the world for the gospel. So God knew when to send Jesus and when the gospel came into this world. So people were very open, at least more open than in earlier times. But it did not affect the monotheism and the exclusiveness of the early Christianity. He also makes a point that one has to notice that every critic who raises this issue about mystery religions works from certain presuppositions. And basically these presuppositions are anti-supernaturalistic. Now, if you can't believe in miracles, or if you are convinced that miracles can't happen, then of course you have to find some other explanation to the New Testament testimony, isn't it? Jesus, who turned water into wine, walked on the waters, died and rose from the dead, just simply doesn't fit into a very naturalistic narrative, isn't it? So you will have to try to find an explanation of why the gospel stories are the way they are. So there are presuppositions in the minds of critics and also in the minds of internet skeptics. And one has to notice that the big problem with all these claims about Jesus being copied from mystery religions or ancient myths is this, that many times these claims that I just showed you in that one mosaic there, it's a kind of a composite image where you take one feature from one story, another feature from another story, and in the end you may have 5, 6, or 7 features, and you lump them together, and lo and behold, you can find them all in the story of Jesus. And now you claim that, look, the story of Jesus just kind of put all these things together. But they are based on oversimplifications, exaggeration, and sometimes outright invention. And they are based on secondary, not primary sources. Now, if you go and read the stories yourself, for example, I remember I went through the stories of Krishna. There are basically 2 sources about the life of Krishna. I am sorry, I don't know how to pronounce those Indian sources, but there are 2 of them. And Dr. Edwin Bryant, who is the professor of Hinduism in one of the universities, says that these sources are variously, or let's say that these sources are very late. They are from somewhere from the 4th or 5th century, and most likely from the 11th century after Christ. So you have the problem of the timing of these sources. And he also says that if anybody got any influence, then it is definitely not that the story of Krishna influenced Christianity. It's the gospel that was spreading all over the world that influenced the stories of Hinduism, which eventually found their way into the sources that tell about Krishna.